Rograkh and Silas Renn Seeker Adept Grixis commander pair is considered to be one of the contender of being the fastest and somewhat of the most consistent CEDH deck available. And after some calculation, I figured out that it has an average win rate of 22.40% from 106 decks. This calculation is taken from this webpage, EDH Top 16, and what I've basically done is here we're looking at Rograkh and Silas decks that have attended into tournaments and the win rate that they got from those tournaments, and what I did was calculate the average. But it would be good to put this 22.40 into a perspective. And as you can see, we are starting to calculate something of a CEDH leaderboard. Now, some could actually say that, hey, we're starting to get a CEDH tier list. But I don't know, I think there are more to it than just looking at some small sample size statistics. I wouldn't view this as a good representation of a CEDH tier list. I've actually made a video about my opinions regarding a CEDH tier list, and those opinions stay the same, but still we can actually look at statistics from tournaments and get a somewhat picture. And as I will keep on making more of these videos, these statistics and inclusion of more commanders in this little leaderboard will increase as I continuously look for more tournaments popping up, and whenever there is a new tournament, I will calculate more statistics from all the commanders that I currently have. So in the future you will start to see changes in these in the future coming updated videos. But back to Rograkh, let's analyze and make a deck tech video looking at good cards to be recommending. So we had 106 different decks, and among those we have 191 unique cards. If we look at all the 106 decks and categorize counterspells, and we look at the amount of counterspells they actually play, we can clearly see that they are playing something of the same amount. When it comes to ramp cards like mana rocks, they are also playing the same amount. When it comes to stacks cards, they are also playing somewhat of the same amounts, either 0 or like 3. If you wonder what those stacks cards actually are, I mean, this is a turbo deck, so what kind of stacks cards are they actually playing? It's Notion Thief, Oppo Agent, Orcish Bowmaster, Narset Power Travails, and Daffy Voidwalker. If we look at the top most common 10 mana rocks, these are the ones the Rograkh and Silas decks are mostly including. When it comes to counterspells, these are the top 10 most included counterspells among all of those different Rogside decks. The amount of tutors, basically the same. Now let me actually explain this graph a tiny bit. The higher the blue staples, each individual staple is a unique deck, and the higher the staple goes, the more tutors they basically have. And we also categorize them by win rate, like low win rate and high win rate. So the further away from me, the higher the win rate, the closer towards me, the lower the win rate. This means that if this staple diagram would be tilting, we could kind of see that more or less tutors means higher or lower win rate. But in this case, they're basically playing the exact same amount. They're just playing different versions of tutors. For example, if we jump over to this page, we have from 106 decks, we have the circle diagram here in the middle, the percentage of inclusion rate of Dark Petition specifically, which is like 2% basically. 2 players played Dark Petition, so it's not heavily played. While Imperial Seal is only played by everyone, but yeah, almost everyone. And what we can do with this kind of statistics we're currently looking at is how many people are playing it. And when there's a difference, because when not everyone or 0 ones are playing it, we can calculate the win rate by only looking at the decks that included, in this case, Gitaxian Probe. So in this case, decks, the 82%, the 87 decks that did include Gitaxian Probe, they had an average win rate of 21. Where the average total win rate from all decks combined is higher. So in this case you could say something like, maybe Gitaxian Probe isn't something you should include. Now, I've actually looked at other commanders and other decks including Gitaxian Probe, and I can say that this is actually consistent. I've seen this result, Gitaxian Probe showcasing a lower win rate than the average in other different commander decks. Gilded Drake is played by one deck and that deck didn't win. This has also been kind of consistent. I have seen Gilded Drakes being included, and when it is included, the win rate actually goes down. With this, we can kinda see what form of strategy the Rograkh Silas Grixis should be going for. And the easy answer is Adnos, 100% inclusion rate. Every deck have been including it. Underworld Breach, an auto-include. Well, you're playing Grixis, so yeah, the Grixis Turbo Shell is basically auto-included here. Fastest Oracle, 100% inclusion rate. Tainted Pact, 100%. And Demonic Consultation, the same. Don't look at the average win rate of Demonic Consultation here. Look at the inclusion rate. What you can see here is that everyone is including it, therefore this is going to get the average win rate equal to the collective. But there are a few other combo cards or combo strategies that some decks play that others don't. The best example here is Bolas Citadel. Inclusion rate 30% and an average win rate 18, which is lower than the average, indicating that Bolas Citadel might be something you shouldn't be going for inside this kind of deck, which actually surprises me because I've always viewed Bolas Citadel personally to be a really awesome card. I still actually think it is good, and if you build your deck correctly around it, it's gonna work out. But apparently people trying to go for a Bolas Citadel inside the deck aren't performing equally good compared to the rest of the collective. Peer into the Abyss also have a lower inclusion rate, really low actually, but also the win rate among those 8 decks that did include it wasn't that good. And I can actually say that this is somewhat something I've seen in other decks too, that the average win rate of including Peer into the Abyss isn't equally good. So in my personal experience observing decks like this, I can say that I've seen this before in other commander decks as well, with looking at Peer into the Abyss. In other words, the directive might be something like stay to the core Adnos and don't deviate too much. But there are a few other cards that aren't really combo cards, but they are on the kind of idea of comboing off and winning. For example, Conqueror's Flail. I actually think this result is kind of interesting. It's Grand Abolisher variant kinda. I've personally always liked Conqueror's Flail. It's a Voltron card in itself, but it also acts like a protection, something that guarantees that you're gonna be comboing off undisturbed. You don't have access to white, so you can't play Grand Abolisher, which is the better version compared to Conqueror's Flail, but still. 4 colorless mana isn't that bad, and the win rate, the average win rate of the 15% or 14%, the 15 decks that included it, is actually pretty good compared to the average. Another card that is also a Grand Abolisher variant is Defense Grid. I don't personally like it because if you're passing turn, you pretty much lose the game with having this in play, but still it's a good card to actually talk about, and I think that the win rate here is pretty much equal to the average. Born Upon a Wind is a new card, so the inclusion rate isn't really correct here, because decks have been playing without Born Upon a Wind, but still we can see that Born Upon a Wind, now that it has been included, have started to perform quite well. And the ability to win in instant speed have always been around. I actually think this is a little bit strange. Now, one deck playing Emergency Zone isn't enough to actually draw any conclusions, but I think more decks should play it. I'm not showcasing this to prove that it's doing good, because one deck doesn't prove anything, but I just wanna recommend it. I like Emergency Zone, so yeah. They all come together towards the Necropotence concept, getting Necropotence to play, paying a lot of life, and then drawing a lot of cards, figuring out how to cast things in instant speed, and boom, ritual away and win in a storm attempt similar to Adnos. Now we can actually dig deeper. We can look at the combination of Final Fortune and the Necropotence together and compare the average win rate of decks that are including both. The green here above me in the circle diagram are the percentage of how many people or how many decks are including it, and in the red that are either including 0 or just one of them. And as a lot of decks actually are including both, you get a very good, or you get the same average win rate to the collective, more or less. However, adding Born Upon a Wind together with Necropotence, you get something that is a little bit better. But once again, I think that Born Upon a Wind is a new card, and that's the big reason why it is a very low inclusion rate. This one is very interesting though. Born Upon the Wind and Warrior's Oath are both in towards the concept of turbo comboing off, and together decks that are including both, they basically have a pretty good win rate. Now obviously before you're including Warrior's Oath, you are including Final Fortune. Now look at the inclusion rate, you see something of 20% here, and then suddenly 16%. That's because the decks that are including Warrior's Oath are first including Final Fortune and then adding Warrior's Oath as the second. The takeaway here is that it might be the correct decision to include both Warrior's Oath and Final Fortune. And Born Upon a Wind. One last card I want to showcase before we're leaving combo and going towards value engines is Mnemonic Betrayal. Played by a lot of decks, I really like that, I think it's a great card, and the average win rate is, yeah, as it's played by everyone, the same as the average. When it comes to value engines, there are basically a few no-brainers: Mystic Remora, Rhystic Study, don't think about it, just auto-include the both of them. But then we get to things that aren't included by everyone. The One Ring, basically played by 20%, 21 decks included it, and among that 21 decks, we have an average win rate of 28%, which is actually really good. And I have seen that the One Ring is actually performing quite well when I've observed it in other decks as well. Another value engine that is kind of played, or not that heavily played, Fairy Mastermind. Not included that much. The takeaway here is that the One Ring might just be better than Fairy Mastermind. Now, what this video is also kinda showcasing are the quality of certain cards for decks in general and comparing cards amongst each other. So it's more than just Silas and Rograkh here. We're looking at things a little bit more universally, so to say, as well. I do want to showcase this. Narset Parter of Veils is a form of not a big value engine, but it's a stacks anti-card draw card that you actually have to protect. On the other hand, you have a commander with Death Touch, so you can actually protect it kinda good, but it's also like impulsing twice. But after the One Ring and Wheels, we don't really value engine that much actually. And I actually think that is the correct decision. You see, Rograkh and Silas aren't really the deck that is gonna grind out and win the long game. They're basically not gonna lose to close to every other grind deck if they're trying to go for that kind of game plan. So sitting in a long game isn't where the Silas Rograkh deck wanna be at. So the choice and the amount of value engines should come with a lot of thought. Basically don't play too many and play the best ones. To give you an idea of the amount, here is a graph. Now I actually didn't add lands into this one because didn't have the energy. Didn't have the energy is a bad excuse, but it's the truth. Now once again, if you categorize all the cards in all decks, you can put them in certain categories, and these are basically the different categories. Now what you're looking at is one individual deck. If we jump around to different decks, we can see that the numbers actually change. But in average it stays the same, once again showcasing that they are playing somewhat of the same deck with different card choices basically. But if you look up there at the value engines, it's a pretty low number. Don't play that many. Around 6%. You can clearly see that the focus here is ramp, combo and tutors and some rituals. You might be asking, what are some of the stranger value engines that some decks have been playing, and yeah, here you have Guild Artisan, didn't perform that good. Let's look at individual cards a little bit more, but a little bit more open, not at a specific category, just the ones that I found stand out. A lot of people view Dramatic Reversal as a purely combo card. But they do forget that Dramatic Reversal is something of all second best ritual in the game actually. Dockside wins above this one clearly, but Dramatic Reversal is okay, maybe not the second best, but it's definitely a contender among the really good ritual choices. And I honestly think that more decks than 7% should be including Dramatic Reversal. You don't need Isochron Scepter to make this card good. Rograkh is a all-in turbo combo deck. Wanna win fast, don't wanna go to the late game. Rain of Filth, another great ritual that should be played a lot more. And, well, the sample size is extremely low, but it's showcasing some potential in the decks that have playtested with it. I've actually seen Rain of Filth in action quite a lot. It's a great card. You're gaining a lot of mana, but you're also fueling your graveyard to make your Underworld Breach better. Opposition Agent isn't actually performing any better than the average, and I've actually talked to a few turbo players and they say they started to basically cut the thing because it's free mana, it's actually considered quite expensive, and the value you get from it isn't that good. It puts you towards the wrong game plan. It puts you towards the control game plan, the game plan that is going long. You wanna be in a fast win combo, so to say. Trying to play the long game is where you start to lose, and including Opposition Agent is where you start to play the long game. Still, I personally think that Opposition Agent is great, but it might be the wrong deck for it. And in the end, Opposition Agent isn't an auto-include, it's just a very good card in general. Same with Notion Thief, that one is actually really expensive. 4 mana is quite a lot. Grinding Station. This is a Brain Freeze variant. If you don't have Brain Freeze, you can, or you don't have access to blue, you can't play Brain Freeze, you can play Grinding Station, which is doing something of a similar job, not equally strong. However, having a Grinding Station increases your combo potential, basically having a second weaker copy to Brain Freeze, but that will increase your consistency. And the 13% decks, the 14 decks that actually decided to include Grinding Station, also obviously including Brain Freeze. Because Brain Freeze has an inclusion rate of 100%, everyone is playing it, it's an auto-include. But the takeaway message is including Grinding Station as well might be a good consideration. So apparently a few decks did include Jeweled Lotus. I think this really showcases exactly how much you're playing the Demir partner here, Silas. You're not playing Silas. He's just basically just for color identity. This one actually surprises me quite a lot. Mana Drain is considered to be a good card for Thrasios, because with the colorless mana gained from Mana Drain, you can activate Thrasios. However, this is a ritual as well. Now, 2 blue pips is a little bit tricky and annoying, but it's not impossible. And this is a deck that is wanna resolve really expensive spells. I mean, Mana Drain could help you resolve your Adnos, and maybe even have mana over post Adnos to cast some artifacts. So I can actually see that Mana Drain might actually be quite good. Now, it's not played by that many, actually 5 decks is like nothing, a 4.7% inclusion rate. The statistics here aren't correct, but I kinda still wanna showcase it. It's showcasing a potential. Take it like that. Rushing River. A lot of people really like Rushing River. It's not heavily played, and I can see why. To explain why Rushing River is great, we have to look at Chain of Vapor. So Chain of Vapor is one of the best ritual spot removal combination you can find. You're basically bouncing your own artifact back to your hand by sacrificing your own lands, sending them to the grave. That's good because that's gonna fuel your Underworld Breach. And then you use Chain of Vapor to bounce one of your opponent's stacks pieces basically. And then you recast all your ritual mana rocks and you transform this into a ritual and a spot removal. Rushing River is basically a weaker version to that. You're paying 3 mana to return target non-land permanent to owner's hand. If you pay the kicker cost, return another target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. And you sacrifice a land for this, a tapped land. So it's gonna go to the grave, fuel your Underworld Breach, and you're bouncing 2 targets, either your own mana rock, or maybe 2 stacks pieces from your opponents. The inclusion rate is really low, but it's showcasing a potential to consider. Transmute artifact is actually played by a bunch, but the win rate here isn't that good. You have Bola Citadel, but we already looked at Bola Citadel as a bad alternative. We also have the One Ring, but I don't think tutoring for the One Ring is always the correct choice. You're usually gonna tutor for Rhystic Study, or Mystic Remora, or Adnos, or Breach, or Phasas. Those are your usual tutor targets. You don't want to tutor for the One Ring, you accidentally wanna draw into it, and if you accidentally draw into it, then you're playing the One Ring. Don't tutor for it. Now, we're not going to go over every single card, because in the end there is a lot of different cards. If you want to know a specific card's win rate and how many players played it, the inclusion rate, write it in the comments below of the video and I will try to answer that and give you the numbers you're seeing here on the screen. And if you have any other questions regarding the result, if you want to ask anything specific, what I found, leave that comment as well and I will try my very best to answer that question, looking at the statistics that I haven't showcased in this video. If you have any feedback on this video, feel free to send those as well in the comments below and I will take it into account to improve this video concept. I personally really like this video style. We're gonna use it later to try to find some of the better players, the most played and the best win rate colors, and something of the best top 100 cards inside the format from tournament results. So lots of updates around this concept is happening. We just need to calculate more commander statistics. But until then, take care guys, I'll see you in the next video.